Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. Well, good evening, and I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. Last time we started the tales and parables of Sri Ramakrishna, and one of them dealt with the topic of one person who was a Vaishnava and the other was a Shakta. And even though their conversation started out very pleasantly, they got to arguing when one of them declared his Keshava the ultimate reality. And so I thought we could listen to another parable that Sri Ramakrishna used to tell, the parable of the chameleon, where several people had seen a little creature and they didn't know the name, and they didn't know what it was, but they all thought it was a different color. And this is a song, and it's a musical representation of the same thing. Each person will sing a tune, a different tune, but in the end, they all harmonize together. All of their tunes harmonize together, except occasionally they'll sing a version in minor instead of major, but other than that, the tunes all harmonize together. This is a live performance, so it's a little muddled, but it should come through.
Away on yonder
Oh, that was the tale of the chameleon. One thought it was red, yellow, blue, green, pink. And so they had to go ask the person who sat under the tree what color it was. And he explained that it was the chameleon and said, when partial truth is thought as whole, its most illusory, transcend the petty partial truths and find the unity. And so the parable that Ramakrishna used to tell illustrates that each person's path, when you think of one aspect of God as the only aspect of God, that's really only a partial truth, because all of those aspects are really part of the one. And so you have to find the unity behind all of those. All right, so our next parable, we're not going to read all of them. Some of them are a little repetitious. But we're going to read the bane of worldliness.
The root of all troubles. In a certain place, the fishermen were catching fish. A kite swooped down and snatched a fish. The sight of the fish, about 1,000 crows chased the kite and made a great noise with their cawing. Whichever way the kite flew with the fish, the crows followed it. The kite flew to the south. The crows followed it there. And the kite flew to the north. And still the crows followed after it. The kite went east and west. But with the same result. As the kite began to fly about in confusion, the fish dropped from its mouth. The crows at once left the kite alone and flew after the fish. Thus relieved of its worries, the kite sat on the branch of a tree and thought, "Why, that wretched fish was the root of all my troubles. I have now got rid of it, and therefore I am at peace." As long as a man has the fish, that is, worldly desires, he must perform actions and consequently suffer from worry, anxiety, and restlessness. But no sooner does he renounce these desires, then his activities fall away, and he enjoys peace of the soul.
Yeah, so the parable saying that your desires are like the fish, and as long as you hang on to various wants in your life, then you end up with all sorts of anxieties following you. Of course, this could also be interpreted another way, just in a very real way, or probably more literal, I should say, where in this world, if you have something or get something that somebody else wants, then they're going to be after you. For example, maybe you win the lottery. Well, a lot of people think winning the lottery is going to make them very happy, but when it's publicized and people find out that you've won the lottery, then everybody suddenly wants to be your best friend, and they want to know if you could give them some money for this project or that project. And people find that they're less happy after they've won the lottery than they were before they won the lottery. Or perhaps you're trying out for a role in a Hollywood picture, and everybody's vying for it, and everybody's jealously trying to get it, and finally you get it. Well, then other people are going to be resentful of you. Why did they pick you? I was much better for it. Or they might start, again, being overly patronizing, hoping that you'll get them a secondary role in the movie. And so having succeeded in getting the big role might not be the best thing for your peace of mind. So these kinds of things come up all the time, where if you get something that other people want, you can end up with a lot of bother about it. All right, well, let's read the next one.
All for a single piece of loincloth. The sadhu, under the instruction of his guru, built for himself a small shed, thatched with leaves at a distance from the haunts of men. He began his devotional exercises in his hut. Now every morning after ablution, he would hang his wet cloth and the copina, the loincloth, on a tree close to the hut to dry them. And one day on his return from the neighboring village, which he would visit to beg for his daily food, he found that the rats had cut holes in his loincloth. Well, next day he was obliged to go to the village for a fresh one. A few days later, the sadhu spread his loincloth on the roof of his hut to dry, and then went to the village to beg as usual. But on his return, he found that the rats had torn it into shreds. Oh, he felt much annoyed. He thought within himself, "Oh, where shall I go again to beg for a rag? Whom shall I ask for one?" All the same, he saw the villagers the next day and represented to them the mischief done by the rats. And having heard all he had to say, the villagers said, "Why, he will keep you supplied with cloth every day. Just do one thing. Keep a cat. It will keep away the rats." The sadhu forthwith secured a kitten in the village, carried the kitten to his hut. And that day the rats ceased to trouble him. There was no end to his joy. The sadhu now began to tend the useful little creature with great care. He feeded on the milk begged from the village. After some days, the villagers said to him, "My sadhuji, you require milk every day. Why, you can supply your want for a few days at most by begging. We will supply you with milk all the year round. Just do one thing. Get a cow. You can satisfy your own creature comforts by drinking the milk. You can also give some to your cat." Well, in a few days, the sadhu procured a milk cow. Had no occasion to beg for milk anymore. By and by, he found it necessary to beg for straw for his cow. We had to visit the neighboring villages for that purpose, but they said, "Oh, there are lots of uncultivated lands close to your hut. Just cultivate the land. You shall not have to beg for straw for your cow." Well, guided by their advice, he took to tilling the land, and gradually had to engage some laborers. Later on, found it necessary to build a barn to store the crop in. Thus he became, in the course of time, a sort of a landlord. And at last he had to take a wife to look after his big household. And he now passed his days just like a busy householder. After some time, his guru came to see him. Finding himself surrounded by goods and chattels, the guru felt puzzled, and he inquired of his servant, "I said he used to live here, in a hut. Can you tell me where he has gone?" The servant didn't know what to say in reply. So the guru ventured to enter into the house, where he met his disciple. And the guru said to him, "My son, what is all this?" The disciple, in great shame, fell at the feet of his guru and said, "My lord, all for a single piece of loincloth."
And even us monks are not free of this problem. when computers started to come in the 80s, at least at an affordable price, it was thought, oh, this will make all the work so much simpler. But then you end up having to learn this new program, and then that program becomes obsolete, and you have to learn the next new program. Our first computer had a 5 megabyte hard drive, which was plenty at the time. But after a couple of years, it wasn't plenty because the programs got more and more complicated. The first accounting program we had, you had to load the accounts payable program to do accounts payable. And then if you wanted to do accounts receivable, you had to unload that module and load another module because it only had 64 RAM. So then, of course, we had to get a bigger computer. And the technologies just kept growing, and you know that those numbers are just ridiculously small. You have watches that can do more for you than that. But this is the problem. Technology keeps making things better and better, which means you have to keep buying more computers that are bigger and faster in order to hold the memory that's required to run these programs that are bigger and better. And people expect things faster and faster. If something was expected perhaps in a couple of days, they now want it in a couple of hours or maybe a few minutes. And so rather than helping with the work, it just seemed to make it faster and faster and faster and more demanding. The more capacity you have, the more demands you have. And so it just goes on like that. So this is always a problem. Things just see, and Vivekananda could see this starting an organization. He knew that an organization was going to involve some of this, but he felt that the benefits of the organization outweighed the disadvantages of the organization. But anytime you have an organization, you've got to have buildings to run the organization, and you have to have people to be in the buildings to run the organization, and it goes on like that. And so this problem is rampant no matter where you go. It doesn't disappear from you. So unless you get into a cave, and you know the caves in inhabitable zones are getting very rare. So, trying to forage for your own food would be very difficult these days. All right, let's read about the tiger that lurks behind worldly joys.
God is like the wish-yielding tree of the celestial world, the Kapatara, which gives whatever one asks of it. So one should be careful to give up all worldly desires when one's mind has been purified by religious exercises. Listen to a story. A certain traveler came to a large plain in the course of his travels. As he'd been walking in the sun for many hours, he was thoroughly exhausted and heavily perspiring. So he sat down in the shade of a tree to rest a little. Presently, he began to think, what a comfort it would be if he could get a soft bed there to sleep on. He was not aware that he was sitting under the celestial tree. And as soon as the above thought rose in his mind, why, he found a nice bed by his side. He felt much astonished, but all the same he stretched himself on it. Now he thought to himself, how pleasant it would be for a young girl to come there and gently stroke his legs. No sooner did the thought arise in his mind than he found a young girl sitting at his feet and stroking his legs. The traveler felt supremely happy. Presently he felt hungry. Well, I've got whatever I wished for, but could I not then get some food? And instantly he found various kinds of delicacies, delicious food spread before him. Well, he once fell to eating, and having helped himself to his heart's content, he stretched himself again on his bed. He now began to think about the events of the day Well, the tiger should attack me all of a sudden. In an instant, a large tiger jumped on him and broke his neck and began to drink his blood. This way, traveler lost his life. And such is the fate of men in general. During your meditation, you pray for men, or money, or worldly honors. Your desires will no doubt be satisfied to some extent. But mind you, there's the dread of the tiger behind the gifts you get. And those tigers, disease, bereavements, loss of honor, and wealth, they're 1,000 times more terrible than the live tiger.
Well, you wonder, this doesn't sound like an Indian story. Most Indian people are not comfortable with big squishy beds. And the poor woman doesn't seem to stay around for the food. Anyway, those are just some problems. I just the story, and we're going to talk about this the squishy bed problem in the next parable. But the point of the story is that you have to be ready for things to be lost as well as gained, and be detached from them. That just because it's easy to get things doesn't mean it's not going to be just as easy to lose them. And of course, in the extraordinary case where someone has done enough spiritual practice to have such cities, to manifest things suddenly, you have to be very careful what you say. And this is why we don't recommend going after spiritual powers, is because if you're not well-rounded spiritually, they can be a terrible danger to you. All right, so we're going to talk about this problem of some people liking squishy beds and some not, in a slightly different context here in the next parable.
The depressing stench of worldliness. When a fishwife was a guest in the house of a gardener who raised flowers, she came there with her empty basket. After filling fish in the market, she was asked to sleep in a room where flowers were kept. But because of the fragrance of the flowers, she couldn't get to sleep for a long time. She was restless, getting to fish about. Her hostess saw her condition and said, "Oh, well, why are you tossing from side to side so restlessly?" And the fishwife said, "Oh, I don't know, friend. Perhaps the smell of the flowers has been disturbing my sleep. Can you give me my fish basket? Perhaps that will put me to sleep." The basket was brought to her, and she sprinkled water on it, set it near her nose, and then she fell sound asleep and snored all night.
We do get used to things, and the things we get used to are the things that are comfortable. And as I mentioned, some people get used to big squishy beds, and other people find it that their back aches in the morning if their bed's too soft, and they like a harder bed. So what one person likes isn't necessarily what another person likes. Now, when we were in India taking our vows, as part of our austerity right after taking our final vows, we go for begging barefoot. Now, for us Westerners, that was an austerity. For the Indian candidates, it wasn't an austerity at all. They walked right over heaps of chipped rock with no problem at all. I got to thinking, maybe for them their austerity should be to wear a tight pair of shoes. They'd probably find it very uncomfortable. So, now flowers, we all do enjoy flowers, but they can be overpowering. Sometimes if you get very strongly scented flowers, they can be overpowering, even though a whiff of them is very nice. If you get too many of them in a room, it can be overpowering. I remember we used to go to iris shows, and we would take the iris in the car. Well, iris can have a pretty strong scent, and in a car full of dozens of iris, it can get pretty overpowering. But this point of the story is that we get used to things, and what Ramakrishna is mentioning is the stench of worldliness. We get used to worldly things around us and don't even realize that it's kind of a stench of worldliness that's around us that we should probably be willing to give up for a more spiritual scent of flowers. That would be the metaphor here that he's using, but it does show up as in another sense that we simply get used to what we're used to, and what's an austerity for one person might be a pleasure for somebody else. All right, let's read the next one.
Worldly goods are not yours forever. The steward of a certain rich man was left in charge of his master's property. When asked by someone as to whose property it was, he used to say, "Sir, this is all my property. These houses and these gardens are all mine." He would speak in this strain and go about with an air of vanity. One day he happened to catch fish in a pond of his master's garden house, in contravention of his strict prohibition. Till luck would have it, the master came upon the scene just then and saw what his dishonest steward was doing. Finding out the faithlessness of his servant, the master at once drove him away from his estate, disgraced and dishonored, and confiscated all his past earnings. The poor fellow could not take with him even his rickety box of utensils, which was his whole property. Such is the punishment that overtakes false pride.
Yeah, so, there is, in some sense, one should take that sense of pride in their job, but not in the sense of the ownership. So you have to, like Karma Yoga says, you have to do things with great attention and do things as well as possible, but be detached from. So the proper attitude would be to feel like the property was yours and to take care of it with as much care as you would take care of your own property, but realize it's not your property and you don't have the right to any of it. Then you're on the right path. So it's not so much that he thought of it as his own property, but that he took advantage of that and actually used it, thinking it was his own property. So take care of it with the same care as though it were your own property, but realizing it's not your own property and you don't have the right to take anything from it. But a lot of times people don't identify enough with say the place of business that they work in. And this is one of the keys of a good management system, is that they try to help instill that kind of feeling in the employees. So they might give them a share of the profits or something of that nature, so that the more successful the business is, the more successful they are. And then they have a sense of ownership in the business to a certain extent, but that doesn't mean they can just take stuff home with them. So that's the difficulty that people get into. They forget that it's not really theirs. All right. This is a very interesting one, kind of the opposite of one of the parables that we might play next time, the pot of curd, where you have a magical pot that is never emptied. This one you have a jar that's never filled. So let's read about it.
The jar of desire can never be filled up. A barber who was passing under a haunted tree heard a voice say, "Will you accept 7 jars full of gold?" The barber looked around. He could see no one. He offered 7 jars of gold, however. roused his cupidity, and he cried aloud, "Yes, I shall accept the 7 jars." Once came the reply, "Go home. I've carried the jars to your house." The barber ran home in hot haste to verify the truth of this strange announcement. When he entered the house, he saw the jars before him. He opened them and found them all full of gold, except the last one, which was only half full. A strong desire now arose in the barber's mind to fill the 7th jar also, for without it his happiness was incomplete. He therefore converted all his ornaments into gold coins and put them into the jar, but the mysterious vessel was as before, unfilled. Well, this exasperated the barber, and starving himself and his family, he saved some amount more. He tried to fill the jar. The jar remained as before. So one day he humbly requested the king to increase his pay, as his income was not sufficient to maintain himself. Now the barber was a favorite of the king, and as soon as the request was made, the king doubled his pay. All the pay he saved, put into the jar. The greedy jar showed no signs of filling. At last he began to live by begging from door to door, and his professional income and the income from begging all went into that insatiable cavity of the mysterious jar. Months passed, and the condition of the miserable and miserly barber grew worse every day. Seeing his sad plight, the king asked him one day, "Below, when your pay was half of what you now get, you're happy, cheerful, and contented. But double that pay, why so you morose and careworn and dejected? What's the matter with you? Have you got the 7 jars?" The barber was taken aback by this question and said, "Why, your majesty, who has informed you of this?" The king said, "No, don't you know? These are the signs of the person to whom the yaksha consigns the 7 jars. He offered me also the same jars, but I asked him whether this money might be spent or was merely to be hoarded. No sooner had I asked the question than the yaksha ran away without any reply. Don't you know that no one can spend that money? It only brings with it the desire of hoarding. Go at once, return the money." The barber was brought to his senses by this advice. So he went to the haunted tree and said, "Take back your gold, O yaksha." The yaksha replied, "All right." When the barber returned home, he found that the 7 jars had vanished as mysteriously as they were brought in, and with it also had vanished his lifelong savings. Those who do not understand the difference between what is real expenditure and what is real income, they lose all they have.
You know, I think we have Swami Vivekananda to think that many rich people make foundations that give away a lot of their wealth. He told Rockefeller to do that, and I think many others followed suit after that. And so the lesson there was, you know, there's no point in just hoarding more and more money. What good is it going to do for you? Mm-hmm. And so they started foundations and give money to all sorts of good causes. And I think I've told this other story once before about, was it Bellingham Gardens that we went to? Mm-hmm. This man had amassed a huge fortune during the Depression when nobody else was making any money. He was head of the Coca-Cola bottling in the South, and he wanted to kind of retire and just to enjoy living on a kind of a retreat and do fishing and so forth. And his wife convinced him that they shouldn't just sit on this money, they should do something with it. And so she convinced them to employ all sorts of people to build a lovely home, and they would go around and buy up antiques and even old plants, like old camellias or something of that nature, to be planted in the gardens. And they would always pay absolutely top dollar for all these things, probably more than top dollar, because they wanted to be generous to the people who were out of work and struggling. And so they employed a lot of people, they helped a lot of other people by buying some of their assets at probably several times their worth, and then they opened the gardens to the public. So it's another example of people not hoarding their wealth and doing something very nice. Oh, and I was going to tell another story about the fish baskets. When I was a kid, there was a sitcom called I Married Joan, with Joan Davis and Jim Backus. And one of the episodes was very much like this fish basket episode. There was this manhole cover that was loose out in the street, and every time a car ran over it went tick-clunk, tick-clunk, tick-clunk. And Joan kept complaining to her husband that she couldn't sleep because of this tick-clunk, 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 tick-clunk. And so after many days and weeks of wrestling with City Hall to get it fixed, they finally got it fixed. But by that time, she had gotten used to the tick-clunk, 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 tick-clunk. And when it got fixed, she found she couldn't sleep without it. So that was a very funny episode. It was really the same idea here as the fish baskets. All right, I think we have time for one more, and this one's not too long. Maybe even two. All right.
While yogi slips down from his yoga. At Kamarpur, I have seen the mongoose living in its hole up in the wall. Feels snug there. Sometimes people tie a brick to its tail. Then the pull of the brick makes it come out of its hole. Every time the mongoose tries to be comfortable inside the hole, it has to come out because of the pull of the brick. Such is the effect of brooding on worldly objects, that it makes the yogi stray from the path of yoga.
Yeah, that's just the lesson of detachment. Again, you have to take care of the things that you have, but if they should leave, if they should go away at some point, detachment from it is the best solution. No point in brooding over the loss. If you brood over the loss of something, then it just continues the pain. You have the power to stop the pain, and you don't have to keep brooding over it. Same thing with snide remarks or people criticizing and so forth. If it's justified, learn from it. If it's not justified, just forget it. Otherwise, they've had a long-lasting effect on you. Did you really want them to have a long-lasting effect on you? No. So why do you keep brooding over it? So it's the same thing. So we don't want to brood on worldly objects or worldly things like comments and so forth. There are many things in the world that we probably don't like, but try to do what you can to remedy the things that you have the power to remedy, and you just have to be detached from the rest of them. That clock is wrong. We are now up on our time, I think. So next time we will continue with some of these other parables. As I say, we probably won't cover all of them, but we might play the pot of courage. It's a long musical parable, but we'll see. We'll see what's coming up next in here, and see if that might be appropriate to listen to next time. And let's see, anything else that we need to announce? Can't think of anything. Holy Mother's Puja is quite late this year. The whole puja season, as you know, is on a lunar calendar, and so it varies from year to year. And this is about as late as I can remember it. Holy Mother's Puja is not till the 4th of January, so we're used to having it sometime at the second half of December, but this time it won't be until January, which in some sense is nice. It doesn't run in, we don't have Christmas and Holy Mother's Puja and New Year's all wrapped into the same week, which sometimes happens and can become a very busy time. All right, let's close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om peace, peace, peace. Oh, and I forgot to wish you a happy Swami Spotananda birthday, Koka Maharaj. His birthday today, and he was one of his direct disciples, and he was the treasurer of the Ramakrishna mission for many years. All right, so with that, we will bid you a good night.